Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a really wild idea, a potential blueprint for one of science's biggest dreams, anti-gravity. But forget about bigger rockets or more powerful engines for a minute. We're talking about a complete shift in how we even think about the problem.
It all kicks off with this one simple but incredibly powerful statement. The idea that the solution to gravity isn't a force you have to fight, but a shape, a pattern, a very specific kind of structure.
So what if that wasn't just some poetic idea, but like an actual set of instructions? For the next few minutes, that's exactly what we're going to explore. We're going to unpack a model where geometry is the literal key that could unlock a whole new relationship with gravity. All right, let's really get into it.
First things first, we've got to totally flip our thinking on gravity. For hundreds of years, we've pictured it as this force that pulls things together. But this model, it suggests something completely different. So, forget the idea of a cosmic pull. Instead, I want you to picture gravity as this constant, organizing pressure. It's like a giant fan pointed down at the floor, creating this downward spiraling flow that kind of presses everything together. It's not an attraction, it's just the condition of the field we're all sitting in.
And you know, this actually lines up with some pretty advanced physics theories that say gravity probably wasn't even around at the Big Bang. It's seen as an emergent property, something that only shows up after more fundamental things, like spin and charge, start creating structure. In this view, gravity isn't the thing itself, it's more like the shadow cast by something more fundamental.
So if gravity is a pushing field, then our entire approach to beating it has been, well, it's kind of been missing the point, right? Which brings us to this huge misconception about what anti-gravity even means.
I mean, think about it. Rockets, propellers, even a good old-fashioned hot air balloon. What are they all doing? They're just blasting away with a ton of external energy to fight against that downward flow. They're brute force solutions. Yeah, they work, but they don't solve the problem. They don't engage with what gravity actually is.
The source material has this amazing quote. It calls these methods Paleolithic. And wow, that really hits, doesn't it? It's like trying to stop a river by just piling up more and more rocks, instead of learning how the current works so you can just float.
And this leads us right to the heart of the blueprint. If fighting gravity head-on is the caveman way, what's the modern approach? The answer proposed here is non-participation. Learning how to become, for all intents and purposes, invisible to the gravitational field.
Okay, so check this out. Normally, an object is just sitting there. Gravity sees it and pushes down on it. Simple. But what if you could change the object's internal structure, make it so harmonious, so geometrically coherent that the field no longer grabs it? The idea is the field just flows around it. The object floats not because something is lifting it, but because it has effectively decoupled itself from the whole system.
And this right here captures the idea perfectly. The goal isn't to create some massive counterforce. The goal is to repattern your own structure so you can just exit the conversation. You simply opt out.
But here's where it gets really interesting. A bit of a plot twist. Because it turns out that perfect geometry isn't quite the answer either. In fact, it creates a whole new problem, a paradox that needs a really clever fix.
See, here's the crucial point. A perfectly symmetrical, perfectly coherent structure would in fact decouple from gravity. Awesome. But it would also cancel out all of its own internal energy and potential. It would be perfectly inert. Balanced, sure, but also dead. Nothing happens. So the real magic trick is something called asymmetrical coherence. Imagine a state that is like 99% perfect harmony, but with one tiny, controlled, intentional imbalance. That little bit of asymmetry is what makes the system active and alive. It's what allows it to navigate the field instead of just sitting there doing nothing.
And the simulated data shows it all. Look, perfect symmetry, not much happens. Total chaos and gravity just grabs on again. But right there in that sweet spot of controlled imbalance, that's where you get the biggest decoupling effect. It's not about perfection. It's about dynamic, intelligent balance.
Okay, so you've built this amazing, cleverly imbalanced structure. Now, what happens if you give it just a tiny little nudge of energy? This is where things go from just floating to something way, way bigger.
So let's go back to our rocket engine, right? It needs a continuous fire hose of energy to work. But with this model,
You don't need a fire hose. All you need is a single spark, just a little, precisely timed tap, into a system that's already perfectly tuned to listen.
And the effect is just mind-blowing. A simulation suggests that a tiny input, like 1 single millijoule, gets amplified inside this structure through something called field recursion to over 1,000,000 times its original strength. The structure isn't just a container, it's an amplifier.
This is what changes everything. You're not just building a machine anymore. You're basically opening up a direct line, a channel, into the fundamental field of energy itself. The device becomes a conduit, a way for energy to organize and multiply itself.
Okay, deep breaths. This sounds like straight-up science fiction, I know. So it's super important that we hit pause and ask the tough question. How much of this is real and how much is speculation? Let's do a quick reality check. All right, Tier 1, the stuff we know is true. The bedrock. We know gravity is geometric. That's Einstein's General Relativity. We know resonance can amplify things. That's literally how a laser works. And we know low inertia states exist, like in superconductors. So the basic building blocks here, they're totally solid.
Then you've got Tier 2. This is the scientific frontier. The stuff that's been observed in labs but isn't quite in the textbooks yet. We're talking about things like torsion fields, the Biefeld-Brown effect, and even these weird weight changes reported in rotating superconductors. These are all fascinating hints, breadcrumbs on the trail, but they remain unconfirmed by the mainstream.
And that brings us to Tier 3, the big leap. The core claims of this whole blueprint, that a passive structure could float using geometry alone, that it could be powered by the ambient charge in the air, and that it could achieve that massive energy recursion. Well, right now, that's the hypothesis. That's the part that needs to be built and tested. This is the edge.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. This entire blueprint suggests that for maybe 100 years, we've been looking in the wrong direction, outward, always searching for more power and bigger engines, when maybe, just maybe, the answer was always inward, hidden not in more force, but in deeper, more elegant patterns.